I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight for this first webinar on parenting teens through COVID-19. Thanks for registering and jumping through all the hoops to be on this with us. Wanted to let you know a couple things. We are going to take questions. You can use the question and answer box down at the bottom, and we'll get those questions, and we're going to compile those and then answer as many of them as we can Wednesday evening at 7:15. So tonight we're just going to have a discussion, but as questions pop in your head as we go through this next hour, please you type as many questions as you want in there. I'm sure there'll be many that are the same question, so we'll compile those all together and then answer them on Wednesday. So I'll say that probably a few times through this call so that you just remember to type those questions in there for us. Just want to thank you for joining us again. For those of you that are just jumping on, Westtown Youth for Christ works with young people in Kitsap and North Mason counties through after-school programs, working in the juvenile justice system, and mentoring pregnant and parenting teen moms and dads. Our programs are open to any and all young people who want to participate in them. And we're going to be sharing a little bit more about some online groups that we'll be offering at the end of this webinar, but just wanted to give you a little introduction about our program that we have here in Kitsap and North Mason on the Kitsap Peninsula. So also want to take just a couple minutes for our panel to introduce themselves to you. We have myself, my name's Phil Daubenspeck, and I'm the Executive Director of Westtown Youth for Christ. We have Kimberly Riley, and we have Sara Yarbrough, and I'm gonna allow them to each introduce themselves. So Kimberly, I'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Riley. I live in Bremerton, Washington. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist associate. I am in private practice, and I am local to the area, so I am pretty familiar with people in groups and YFC. So I'm super excited to be here tonight.
Thank you. And Sara, can you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. My name is Sara Yarbrough, and I am I'm a marriage and family therapist. I am currently in Spokane, Washington, but am from the Bremerton area and worked with Phil and Westtown Youth for Christ for a long time. Been working with kids for more than 20 years, and I currently have 3 teenagers living in my house, so I'm living in your world right now. I am passionate about helping kids get to where they need to go.
Cool, thank you. And as I said, I'm the Executive Director at Westtown Youth for Christ. I've worked there for 15 years, started off working in an after-school program in Port Orchard at one of the middle schools, and have kind of worked my way up through the organization locally and serve on a few teams nationally as well. And I also have 3 kids ranging from 12 to 22. So I'm in this with everybody as well. So thank you ladies for joining us and being a part of this. I also want to start by saying a quick thank you to somebody who's not on this, but who part of their research was what kind of got our brain going to do this. And that is Dr. Amy Mezulis and her team, her research team over at Seattle Pacific University and Uplift. And they have been doing some research just since the social distancing and stuff started about 5 or 6 weeks ago. Diving into how that's going to affect people emotionally, and specifically how it's going to affect young people between the ages of 14 and 24. And so I just wanted to start off by sharing just a few pieces that they found that they've shared, and that will kind of give us a way forward for this conversation. So they've had 2,400 people that have been a part of their sample, and 500 of those are between the ages of 14 and 24. And so one of their biggest questions they went into this with was, will teens and young adults be especially susceptible to mental health problems from the school closure and stay-at-home order? And what they have found is that that question, that was kind of their hypothesis, was that that probably would be true, is that they're especially showing depression and loneliness in young people between the ages of 14 and 24. And that's showing much higher than any other age group that they've done research on. And they would say that 2/3 of those young people in their study are showing what they call clinically significant depression symptoms. Things like losing motivation, isolating, saying this doesn't affect me, saying I'm bored, saying things don't matter, not wanting to do things, are presenting as signs of depression in a lot of those young people. One thing that they also noted was that anxiety didn't seem higher in the younger age group, but that it was showing high in all age groups. So while theirs wasn't especially high, they were all high, and it presents in different ways for young people. So just some great information for us to go, man, our kids are really feeling this right now. And they are really starting to need help. And so that's why we're here. And so today we just wanted to talk through a little bit about what that looks like and ways we can help kids. And so as we got together, the three of us, Sarah, Kim, and myself, and we were talking about this stuff, one of the things that we were talking about is coping skills. And Kim, I wanted you shared something with us about that. And so would you mind just sharing that a little bit? Or maybe it was Sarah, I can't remember. One of you shared a little bit about coping stuff. So one of you share, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll share a little bit about coping. So I didn't mention this, but I also have three teenage girls at home, and have some experience working with children, and most specifically children who live in different areas where they've had to learn to cope. And so one thing that I thought was really important about what we're kind of living in right now is helping these kids understand exactly what they need before they can know what they're coping with, right? First, so that if you have a child maybe who's feeling really sad, they have to understand that sadness is what they feel, and then they can learn how to maybe cope with the sadness. So some kids, that means drawing things out, right? Drawing out their feelings or writing out their feelings. Some kids like to listen to music, so maybe music is their way of coping with their sadness. But the main thing was really helping children understand what they feel so that they know what they're trying to cope with.
Yeah.
I'll jump in on the back of that if that's okay.
Yeah.
Kids will continue with a coping skill they've already developed over their time. So kids who tend to cope with stress by being with their friends are probably going to have lesser coping skills than kids who cope with stress by being at home, alone. So however they have developed a coping skill to deal with different stressors is how you're going to see it probably show up, because that's a skill they already have. They're going to return to what they know. And helping our kids understand that this isn't their forever reality. This is a crisis time frame for them. And when I work with kids, when we're dealing with crisis, to downgrade expectations from accomplishing all the things to like, what can we control right here, right now? And so for a lot of us, it's just going back to the basics. It's how's your sleep patterns? Are you sleeping too much? Or are you sleeping too little? How's your nutrition? Are you going straight for the junk food all day and just being lethargic and not feeling good? Or are you aiming for more fruits and vegetables, more proteins, less empty carbs, lots of water? What we want to do with kids is help them engage their problem solver, their prefrontal cortex. So to do that, they need to sleep the right amount, not too much, not too little. They need to eat a good amount, not too much, not too little. They need to exercise their bodies, and they need to have healthy relationships with other people around them. Those coping skills are going to help their brain re-engage to help them solve their own problems and be able to communicate. So Kimberly was talking about they need to own their feelings. Some of these kids are just drowning because they don't even know what their feelings are. So start with some basics and helping them do some self-care. Parents, same thing here. self-care, so that our kids can engage their best problem solver, which is their brain. They probably know what they need to do. They just are having trouble figuring out how to engage that part of their brain.
Yeah. And what, like, so how do you, like, I think for me, when I hear things like that, I get all these ideas racing through my head, right? Like, oh my gosh, I can help my kids. What's the best way to introduce those? Is it one at a time? Is it a couple at a time? Like, how do we not overwhelm? And this is going to be true about all the things we're talking about today, right? Tonight is
Yeah.
like, how do we introduce these things at the right pace? It's probably different for different kids, I would imagine. So I don't know, maybe you guys can share a little bit about that.
As you introduce something to a kid, I would agree with Phil's caution. So I would always start with teenagers, in particular, with sleep. They want to sleep or they don't want to sleep. I ask kids, what's your sweet spot with sleep? Where do you sleep the best? And I get them to solve that problem and start with sleep, because food comes out of sleep. Exercise comes out of sleep. Water intake comes out of sleep. All of those things. So if we can nail sleep first, which seems like such a dumb thing with kids, but it's key. If they're not sleeping because they're staying up all night chatting with their friends or playing video games, they're not going to be good problem solvers during the day. If they're going to bed and staying in bed until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, again, they're not good problem solvers. So that's where I would start, is with sleep. And then I get them to solve their own problem. Once they've found their sweet spot with sleep, when to go to bed, when to wake up, then what's their sweet spot with food? What's their sweet spot with exercise? That kind of stuff. I ask kids what they think their sweet spot is. And if they think about it, they're usually pretty smart.
That's great. Kim, any thoughts from you on that?
I think, yeah, I think so, talking about little small kids, right? So maybe the 3, 4, 5, and in that age range, elementary school kids, you want to start small with them. You can literally just do a feelings chart. You can start right there. You can say, hey, can you pick out what you feel today? And they can look at the little pictures and pick something, and getting into that routine of understanding, kind of like what Sara was saying, knowing what they feel, I think is going to be helpful. That's very simple. Parents can use that too. You can pick your feelings out on that chart as well, and then kind of go from there. And if they want to expound on that, then you can give them that opportunity too. But you're right, like, we don't really want to overwhelm these little people right now with all the other home learning that they're doing. So start small. Feelings charts work great.
That's great. And that leads into conversations. Like, how do we talk to our kids? How do we ask them how they're doing in a way that they'll answer us? Especially teenagers. They're always like, yeah, I'm good. Right? So what's some, as I think about, I'm at home, I've got 2 kids in school, one that's out of school, and I know mine are girls. So I know that they need to get words out. They want to share, they want to talk, just not to me. So always. So, what might be some great tools for us to use to kind of help with those conversations, to get those started?
So I would challenge you, Phil. I think that kids do need their parents, and they need the stability of their parents. And so much of parenting teenagers is standing still. So they want you to be available when they want to talk, and they want to know that you're going to be available. And so a lot of parenting teenagers is just being willing to stand still. And instead of telling them what they need to do or telling them what they need to be thinking, just keep asking questions. A great question is, tell me more about that. Help me understand that. So when they're having a meltdown, just listen through the meltdown, because we're all having meltdowns right now. Moms, dads, everyone, we're having meltdowns. It's okay. It's okay. But I would say, if you're parenting a teenager, just stand still. If you stand still long enough, they're going to come find you, because they need you. You're their safe person.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I think for sure it's learning to ask open-ended questions, right? So making sure we think through those questions before we ask them, word them differently than we want to. We want the easy answer sometimes, but
Yep.
dive a little deeper.
Yep.
Boundaries. Boundaries are tough right now because you know, I'm working from home, they're schooling from home. So boundaries that are naturally in place because we're separated aren't there. We were talking a little bit about some folks might have college kids home. You know, I've got a 22-year-old that's been back quite a bit since she's not working. And so that adds a dynamic to boundaries in the home and parenting and that sort of thing. And what are some, let's just talk about boundaries. Like how can we help kids with that right now?
I think teaching children to kind of own their space, right? So in general, even when we come out of this whole crisis, they have to know how to have their own space, and we have our own space. And then our spaces overlap. So that's what's happening right now. All of our spaces are overlapping without us wanting them to. You know, we didn't plan for this. So I think this is a good time to just teach children that, you know what, you have your special space that you like to go read a book, and I have my special space, I like to go and read a book, and we're just going to respect that space. When you have a full house, right, like that's probably a little bit harder to do. And so then you have to really be really creative. And then also learn how to just be in shared space. I mean, so there's all of that, right? There's boundaries of teaching people that it's okay to have your space. But then there's also the idea of how do we share the space and respect, like I'm sitting here, you're sitting there. I'm reading, you're not, so we're going to be quiet. I mean, it really is just trying to figure that whole thing out. Family systems look different. We've got parents at home now with only children when they're not able to go be in the world like they would. So they might be space invading, you know, they might be in their parents' space. Make room for that. This is new for them too. Or even parents, I've been talking to a lot of parents themselves who also feel like they don't know what to do. So I think just like for their own space, right? I think right now is just learning what is a boundary. We haven't had to do this before probably for this long of stretch of time. So defining what a boundary is first, and then letting children own their space, you own your space, and then let's be in shared space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Great information. I think it's super, like you said, it's important, not just now, but that's something that is important to carry over, you know, just into normal life too, like making sure those boundaries are set up. Did you want to add anything, Sarah?
I think if you have teenagers, they require more space than little kids do sometimes. And sometimes the boundaries look more like sharing devices, sharing screens, sharing noise in the house, there's a lot of sharing happening that may not. So in my world, and probably your guys' world too, it's figuring out what are the priorities with the internet usage. When you have all of these devices sharing the internet and mom and dad both have to work and they have to work video, those kind of things it just takes conversation and it takes trial and error. And sometimes moms and dads look dumb. This is just not normal. And so to just relax and go, it kind of is what it is right now, and relax on some things. And other times this is our hierarchy and priority for our family. And mom and dad got to make some money. So you kids got to get off the internet. Give us 2 hours so we're not getting booted off. Those conversations, you just got to keep talking about it. And for the families that are in super small spaces, man, you know, when all your kids are home and you're in a tiny space and everybody's sharing the living room, breathing, man, lots of breathing. I feel for you guys.
Yeah. So with that boundaries conversation and tight spaces and not tight spaces, right? Like we're all just around, and And I think it's easy for us to dive into conversations with our spouse or with one of our kids that maybe the other kid isn't typically there. And so we can have, some private conversations, and those private conversations are turning into family conversations from time to time because it's just a different situation than we're used to. And so kids are hearing parents stressed about money, stressed about work, stressed about, I don't know if I'm, helping my kids with school enough. I don't know, there's just a lot of worry and anxiety. Are we going to get sick? And then kids hear that and they kind of start to pick up and sometimes mirror some of those emotions without even, I think sometimes that happens and they don't even know it's happening, right? They're just all of a sudden they're stressed out because they heard something. So let's just talk about that, because I know in my house, I am on a computer with headphones in. I'm back here on my deck or I'm in my bedroom, but walls are thin, right? And so kids are hearing me have conversations with staff and just with people in general, that could stress them out if they don't understand the context, they don't understand the background behind it, they don't understand the 10 conversations that happened before it, right? But they just hear this one blip and in their mind it can spiral out of control. I mean, what are some ways we can help those kind of situations?
So I just had, I work with a lot of couples. I do a lot of marriage counseling. And one of the things that I found that couples are really struggling with right now is when they are in a hard discussion, their kids are hearing that and the kids weren't privy to those discussions before. So exactly what you're talking about, couples are struggling with, they used to have space to talk about things. They used to be able to jump in the car and go on a date or whatever. And now they're stuck with their kids. They're stuck at home all the time and their kids' anxieties are, so my couples are saying, how much do I bring my kids into these hard conversations? And those are hard because every family, like Kimberly was talking about, every family system is different. How much you reveal, how authentic you are with your kids is up to you. But this is a phenomenal opportunity that we've not had in the past to really sit with our kids and develop character with them, help them develop resiliency, help them to talk through hard things. And they get to see us as individuals deal with hard things in ways that are productive, rather than their friends who are drinking or smoking or running away or just being rebellious or shoving the feelings down, all of these not great coping mechanisms. To have a conversation with your elders and say, these are hard things and we're battling through and we're working on it. But Kimberly can probably talk with how she works with youngers. So how do you, when little kids are starting to show anxiety symptoms without the words and the questions that go with it?
That it is really unique, right? The little kids that we see, it's so unique working with them because they may be experiencing something and they don't know how to express that. And so you see it show up in different ways. So like Bill was saying, maybe you had a conversation with somebody and you didn't even know that they heard, and all of a sudden they're asking really strange questions and you're like, where is that coming from? So first of all, I guess as parents, be aware of the changes in your children, especially the little kids. Be aware of the changes, the questions that they're asking, the statements that they're making, right? And then respond to that and be curious. If you want to open it up before it gets to that, right? So if you want to sit and talk with your kids about things, then again, open it up with questions. So say to them, hey, I want to tell you something, do you have any questions, first of all, about all the things that you've been hearing or seeing or witnessing? I brought up, and when we were talking, just the three of us, I brought up the commercials that are on TV right now. So that's not even stuff that you guys are saying with your kids. It's stuff they're hearing just in simple commercials. So the little kids, I think they just process a little different, and they might hold it in and not necessarily say it. So with them, just kind of pay attention to the things that they do put out, you know, the things that they're drawing or the things that they're saying. But be open with them also, right? So start conversations with them and be curious about their reality.
That's great. That is great tips, great advice for us to use in that stuff. I want to just remind folks that are on this and listening that we are taking questions. So on the bottom of the screen, there is a question and answer box, and you can type your questions in there and we will see those. The great thing is we'll see them, and it doesn't share them with everybody. So you can ask it privately, and then we'll be able to respond to those questions. So feel free to do that. Kind of going from that conversation on, you know, our kids see these, they start to experience these emotions. Depression and loneliness, from the research that SPU has done, are showing as the highest, but also anxiety, we know, is a huge deal already in young people in this age group. And so what are some things that we can be looking for, and signs that maybe our kids are kind of on that line of like depression, you know, and how do we help them with that? And how do we, as a parent, I mean, we know our kids, but what are some things that it's like, man, if it gets to here, I need to get some help for my kids. Like how, you guys kind of maybe speak to that a little bit.
Okay, so here's the deal with adolescents and depression and anxiety. They normally have big swings in their emotions already. They normally have periods of highs and lows. There's a range of normal in anxiety. So, but it tends to be correlated with kids who are on social media a lot, typically have higher levels of depression and anxiety. So and it's not that one causes another. I'm depressed, so I go on social media. It's a cyclical thing. And so if you think that our kids are connecting with one another through social media, or maybe they're on video games together, or maybe they're on Zoom together or whatever, if they're spending a lot of screen time connecting with their friends, but it's not meeting that need, you need to be aware of that. Media is a double-edged sword right now, because it's the only way that kids have to connect with one another if they're following the social distancing rules. But it also can greatly contribute to their depression and anxiety. So when I work with kids, I challenge them to downgrade their social media time, maybe just a little bit every day. Go outside and go for a walk. Being outside and being physically active it's not the magic bullet, but it's about as close as we can get without getting them on meds, if they can go outside and be physically active. So that's going for a run, going for a bike ride, going for a walk with the dog, those kind of things. Again, diet, exercise, sleeping patterns are things to watch for. But don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. If you mention, are you feeling suicidal? You have that gut reaction to your kid, there's something wrong. If you bring up suicide, it doesn't cause them to be suicidal. It just puts the discussion on the table. If you get a hint, like maybe they're cutting or involved in some self-destructive behavior, address it gently. I wonder if this is part of how you're coping. I wonder if you're thinking about that. If the answer is yes, you need to call a professional. So I think Phil's got some links to suicide hotlines or other therapists in your area. People are on high alert right now for mental health stuff, but your parent gut, pay attention to it. If you think something's wrong, like they're not just a little bit sad, they've really gone off the deep end. They've always been waffling, and now I feel like things aren't good. Ask the gently direct questions and then go for it. Things that go off are things that make me go, something's not quite right. They're sleeping a ton or they're not sleeping at all. they're eating everything in sight, or they haven't eaten anything in days. These huge, like, extreme behaviors, right? We're all sort of dealing with a little bit of depression and anxiety as a culture right now. So it's a little bit harder. It's these huge extremes where you go, something's really off. Pay attention to it. Most parents have that mother bear, father bear instinct. Pay attention to it. If you feel like something's off, ask the questions.
And I think, you know, to go along with some of the depressive symptoms that maybe you'll be seeing, you know, Phil, you asked, like, how do you know when, right? I think Sara did a really great job talking about those moments where they just get super low. I feel like sometimes with anxiety, we miss it a little bit. And so I feel like if you know, when is like, you know, when should you say, hey, help, you know, 911, I need some help, anxiety is getting out of control, is when they start to say things about not wanting to go outside, or they start to talk about, like, there's an increase in them talking about health, right? Like, you know, even if they themselves, like, say their whole lives they've been dealing with allergies and they're coughing now, yet they're talking about, you know, COVID-19. I mean, sometimes we have to bring people back to, like, what's reality for you? You know, hey, let me remind you, you have an allergy to, you know, to mold, right? And so every year you cough at this time. So you'll recognize when the anxiety symptoms start to rise, they'll start to say things that maybe don't make sense for who they are, right? So you'll say, wow, that seems a little extreme. You loved going outside. You don't want to go outside and ride your bike now. Or, you know, every year at this time, your nose is plugged, it's running, you're sneezing. You know, other things too, like when they start talking about, like, their tummy hurting, or, you know, I mean, there's little symptoms that people don't always point to it being anxiety, but I think right now, so much is going on that people are feeling a little anxious. And part of that is just naturally, like, being aware and having wisdom. So we do need to use wisdom. And so we can't get confused with, is my child just being wise, you know, with them actually pushing themselves into this deeper space of anxiety. So really listen. Again, it goes back to hearing what they say and noticing some of those extremes. The extreme behaviors when we're talking about depression can also be some extreme behaviors when you're talking about anxiety. And so you want to help them just see what's real, like you would do with anybody in an anxious moment. Get them back to what's real for them.
Yeah, that's, you know, learning how to ask those open-ended questions in those moments, I think, is critical, you know, because anybody can answer yes or no to you, but to make them dig a little bit deeper, asking why 2 or 3 times in different ways to get to, like, the core of, like, what are they feeling in their gut, you know, that they haven't maybe exposed in a while. And I think what you said earlier about creating that safe space where your kids know that you're available just to listen. When we want them to talk may not be when they're ready to talk, but when they're ready to talk, we better be ready to listen, right? So making sure that we're prepared for that whenever that moment comes around, I think, is super important. You mentioned social media, phones, and my kids love their phones right now. It's their connection, but it can also be a really dangerous place for them to be just for the amount of time they're having on there. But it is also their connection to the outside world, right? It's their safety thing. So it can be, as a parent, I might not just want to take that phone away because they feel like you're literally ripping their world out of their hands. But at the same time, there does need to be some boundaries for electronics and social media, video games, Netflix. You could watch Netflix, you could watch Tiger King, you know, all day if you wanted to. But how do you introduce those kind of boundaries? We talked about some of the family boundaries earlier, but how do you introduce some of those kind of boundaries slowly, you know, and what could some of those be for a parent that they might want to think about introducing? If, let's say, kids have been home, right? Like, I'll just use my family as an example. Kids were home from school. We thought, hey, 3 weeks spring break, no big deal. It's going to be fun. We're going to party. right? Like we had a great time those first couple weeks. And then it was like, oh man, like we're in this for the long haul, right? Like school's starting back up. Now we got to get back on a schedule. And, we kind of had to tighten things down a little bit. What are some ways that we can kind of tighten things down a little bit while still giving them that freedom, and them not necessarily feeling like we're taking things away, but like, helping them realize that it's healthy for them to do this when they don't want it. I don't know. So what are you guys' maybe thoughts on that, those kind of things?
Well, screens are a big deal right now because they have to be on them for school, right? I mean, I don't know about your school district that you're in, but my kids all have to be on a screen all day for school, doing their school, and then that's how they're connecting with their people, and that is really important to them. If you have not been a parent that has had a lot of control over screen time, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, and I would not suggest that you make a huge parenting shift at this time. I'll just tell you for my family, and what I help other families to work toward is I don't think that anything good happens after midnight. So online. So we shut our internet off at 11 o'clock and there's no more internet. And we have parenting controls over phones and they don't work unless it is, unless somebody's texting that's on the approved list. So I don't have boys up texting girls at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I'm saying, we also set up guidelines for how, when screen time is available outside of school. So they have a certain chore list that they have to get done. But that is part of the culture that we've developed over years that hasn't been since the kids have been home. We've had more controls over screen. So if you're a parent that really has screen time has been part of your family and your kids are big video gamers, I would not take this time to do a huge parenting shift. I would do tweaks to it. Let's turn the screens off at dinner time. Let's start there. Let's have dinner together, or maybe you have dinner and breakfast together, but I would choose windows where the family is agreed on and then start expanding that window little by little so that they're getting more interactive time. One of the troubles that our young adults have is that they don't have the ability to draw their own boundaries with screens. And so it affects when they go to college, it affects their relationships. They go back into screens when they're nervous because they don't know how to have relationships with other people. So one of the character traits that you can start developing now, because you have access to your kids all the time, is helping them figure out when is screen time enough? And when do you need to go do something else to make your brain work in a different way? When are you having trouble with a relationship and it's time to dive into that relationship rather than retreat back into a screen? So I have a lot of opinions about screen time. It's a huge part of family stuff. But I would say don't make a huge shift, make tiny little shifts every day to get where you want to go. So figure out what does healthy look like for your family and your kid, and then start making incremental movements. But if you have teenagers, you need their buy-in. Don't just drop the hammer, or you're going to end up with, you don't want that. You don't want the rebellion, and you don't want kids screaming out and running out of the house. And that is one of the dangers right now, is that kids who are mad at their parents are running away. That's a whole other end of my clinic practice. But we get runaways because parents are dropping the hammer too loud, too late. So incremental.
That's great. Kim, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I just think, some kids are using or have used video games or phones or, their devices as part of their coping. So again, checking in with what are you doing on your phone? How are you using your phone, or how are you using this game, or how are, you using this tablet, and then helping them expand their coping. Because I do think they're doing tons now on the computer for school, but some of those kids, when I see kids, I'm like, what are you doing with the game? Well, that helps me relax. So if they're telling you that that's part of their coping skill, that's how they relax, then you know, if you're going to limit that time, then help them find something else to do with that, with the coping that needs to be done, right? I think that's just the thing that I hear a lot, just in general with kids, is that they're defining that the music is on their phone, right? Or, you know, maybe they're texting their friends, and that's how they're relating. I don't know. So we just want to be curious about what they're doing, and then help move them in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. I think that this is like, for some of us, maybe a big eye opener of just how much time our kids spend on their phones, right? Because we're with each other all the time now. Where they were at school for several hours, and then we'd get home from work, and then, you know, we only see each other a few hours a day, so it doesn't really seem like that much. But when you realize that they're on their phone all day at school, all day after school, into night, into evening, overnight, you know, like, you start to realize, man, you know, perhaps there's just a little too much freedom there. And I think, you know, both of you saying the incremental steps, I think, for any of these changes, but especially ones where it takes away their connection or their way to cope with things, is just critical. Like, that's going to be really, really critical. Thank you for that. That's great information. Class of 2020, graduation, school closure, all of the things that kids are missing out at the end of the year. Not class of 2020. Kim, how did you describe the class of 2020 on our call the other day?
I said that they were all like only children, that they all are uniquely in this movement on their own, and that we don't really necessarily know what it feels like for them, because this is so unique.
Yeah, and I think that's really true. I also, my middle daughter is in 9th grade, and when she came home from school before spring break, her and her friends were making these like end of year videos, like highlight videos of all the pictures in their phone. And we were kind of laughing about it and joking about it. And then like she just reposted, and it was like, no, that's really it. Like, that's really the end of the school year, you know, before spring break, they're out of school. They're not going to see these friends for the rest of the year. So we've got class of 2020 that's experiencing a massive loss of graduation, of graduation parties, of just all of senior night, and I mean, just all the things that they have been looking forward to, prom. And so that's one category of this. But then for the other kids, it is this loneliness. It's this not seeing their friends. It's this sense of like, you know, walking into summer with like almost like no closure, right? Because the last day of school, physical school, happened in March. So, you know, what it's just kind of weird, you know? So I don't know, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on how do we help this class of 2020? I'm not sure it's posting our senior pictures on Facebook, bragging about our great time of graduating when they're grieving the loss of their own senior pictures in a lot of cases. But how do we help the class of 2020? And then how do we help the younger kids, you know, the rest of the high schoolers and middle schoolers, really process through the loss of school and these friendships and lack of seeing their friends and stuff right now? Kim, let's have you start this one.
You know, so the class of 2020, I use that analogy with them being only children, because I think oftentimes, you know, only children are kind of in this world alone. And I think the class of 2020 really is, they're literally in this world kind of alone right now. And so what you do when people are lonely is you invite them in, right? And so I think what we have to do with this class of 2020 is invite them in and ask them what they're feeling. Like, what's your experience? What's your experience? And individualizing that, because no, I don't think any senior is feeling the exact same thing, except we know they're all feeling loss, right? So what is the loss? We don't know. So being really curious about, what do you feel like you lost right now? And we talked, about the parents, so that the parent view, give parents space to talk about what it is that they feel like maybe they've lost. But let's start with the seniors first. Ask them first and get their input, and then try to, if we can, maybe then identify how we match, right? So like if they say something and we're feeling that too, then we can say, wow, I can see how that is, and then join with them on that, but let them lead us first. And then for the little kids, the younger kids, or even the 11th graders, right? The people who are going to be seniors next year, this is where anxiety shows up again. So now we have a whole, kindergarten through 11th grade who are really nervous. Is this going to happen to me? What's going to happen? Am I going to school in the fall? It's just so much that's unknown. So really paying attention to what they're feeling, and then the best that we can, give them an answer. And that answer may be, I don't know, but guess what? I don't know with you, right? So it's not having information that they don't have. We just don't know together, right? So joining with them, but letting them lead us through it first.
Yeah. Yeah. In my own personal journey, I have somebody graduating from college, and I have somebody graduating from high school, and they're both missing out this year. And they are bummed. They feel like they're not being celebrated. They are struggling. And I know that my clients who are in the same position, they're struggling as well. But I would agree with Kimberly in that their struggle looks a little different, because not every kid was looking forward to prom. Not every kid was all about the ceremony or the party, but every kid had something that they were sort of looking to, that this is what I'm working toward. And so just hearing kids, the reality is that everybody loses something in their life at some point. And so this is a great opportunity to give them grief skills, to walk with them and let them be sad for a little bit. And then after they've been sad for a little bit, then now what? What can we do to honor your achievement? What can we do to help you feel connected and feel like you've done a great job? That nobody can fix this. There isn't a sign in the front yard that's going to fix their grief. There's no post on Facebook. There's no drive-by parade that's going to fix this. But the kids know what they need to move on. And I find it really important to just listen to the kids. What do you need? What do you need? And maybe at Christmas time, we're going to all celebrate these kids. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know I feel as a parent, I feel the loss for them. And I think in some levels, I feel the loss even more than my kids do, because I know what they could have had. My seniors don't know what they could have had. They're only imagining it. I feel that loss. And so I have to keep that in check and just understand that their loss is theirs and mine is mine, right? Not being able to show my senior pictures to all my friends and all of that for my kids. But that's different. It's different. But this is just one of those hard things. And there isn't an easy answer for it. There isn't a 1, 2, 3, and that's going to fix it. It's just a loss, but it's a memorable one, and they're going to be a unique class unlike any other. So they get to own that.
For sure. Longest spring break ever. I think that you guys both mentioned this, but grief and the grief that we're experiencing, I think the grief, one of the griefs is school loss and school surrounded, but I think there's a lot of other griefs that we are experiencing, a lot of other loss that we're experiencing. And I, I was on something last week, and the gal was sharing, she has a senior in high school who's graduating, and the mom was like really, really, really looking forward to throwing this huge graduation party for this senior. Like, save the dates went out in the fall. It was going to be this huge thing. And so mom's been planning it, places are reserved, people bought plane tickets, like the whole thing, right? It's this huge party. And mom is grieving the loss. And how do I replace this party that I'm throwing for my senior? Well, the senior is like, Mom, I don't care about the party. I really wanted to go to prom with my boyfriend. So can I buy this dress and you make dinner and we just have prom in the living room? Like, the loss of us as parents is one thing, I think, Sarah, because you mentioned, like, we know, like, we have this plan, we have this thing in our head, and so we have this loss we're experiencing. But I would say oftentimes, like, because we're all individual, the loss that we feel is completely different, like you said, than the loss our kids feel. And we need to be really sensitive to that loss that our kids are experiencing, and not push our own grief onto them, even at this point, like not push the grief of something that we're feeling into them where they're actually not really grieving it, but they're grieving something completely different, right? And let's let them grieve what they're grieving, and let's let us grieve what we're grieving, and respect each other's space in that. But grief is like such a huge thing. And grief, I think many of us know grief often comes in waves of emotion. Like it's this, huge thing where there's like, kind of like anxiety, same thing, big waves of anxiety. So how can we talk about grief and loss? We talked a little bit about school, but how can we talk about the grief and loss in other areas, in other experiences? Perhaps it was a vacation, or perhaps it was something that our kids were really looking forward to that they're going to miss out on. How do we approach those kinds of subjects and kind of help our kids cope with those?
I don't know. My oldest daughter, she's a class of 2020 graduate this year from high school, and she was supposed to go on a trip to France. And it was, it was canceled, obviously. And then my middle daughter was supposed to go on a trip for dance. And somebody posted birthday. My middle daughter and my husband celebrated birthdays in the last, 15 days. And so I think I just really am trying to hear them out. I really wanted to say, you can go to France another time. I really wanted to just say that, but technically she can't, not with these kids. She was very open about that. This was with her French class. This was, planned with her French teacher. We had been paying for this for like 10 months. So there was all of that, and I really tried to just honor her, and then we talked about once she realized I'm not going, we talked about when would she like to go, right? So I had to just let her lead that. My middle daughter would dance. Once she realized she wasn't going, we talked about next year when she does go. So there was like with any grief, you have to somehow or another find hope, and so whatever the loss is, I just let a person express what they feel like they lost, and then somehow or another bring them back to the hope that either they'll get to do that again, or that they will get to do something similar, or that they will have the memory. So, of course, when you lose graduation, right, or when you lose the experience of being able to say goodbye to your friends, that's a memory. You have a memory. You have the memory of that Friday, your last day in school. So helping them be able to find hope for the future or be able to reflect on the past.
Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of grief comes from a sense of loss of control. We don't control things. We don't control whether moms and dads go back to work when they get to go back to work. We don't control when kids get to go back to school. We don't even control our own health in some respects. this loss of control, but it extends into, we don't control our schedules anymore. We have this difficult thing for people who are type A planners. This is difficult because how do we move forward when we have no plan? We have no plan. And if we have a plan, we have to come up with 40 plans. It's very difficult. And so for kids who are planners and have their life all planned out, this is really hard for them because we have told them, you can be anything you want, except you can't leave your house right now. So, and you may not go to college in the fall. Those are hard things. I think a lot of grief is loss of control. We don't control things. The hard part is just realizing that. Then the lovely part is, then what do you do with that? What do you do when you come to that reality? And that's where growth comes. I think one of the best things for grief, I would say my 2 magic bullets would be, for application, would be go for a walk and journal. Journal, 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 journal. It takes whatever's swimming in here and puts it to the speed of your pen. It helps the feelings get words, and the words become story, and nobody else has to read your journal. So your journal doesn't have to make sense. One of the best tools that I have for working with people is journal. Journal what you're going through, because maybe you're going to be like Diary of Anne Frank, you know, and it's going to be awesome and people are going to read your journal and you're going to become a hero in 10 years. Maybe you're just going to have better mental health. Maybe you're just going to be able to breathe today. But journaling is one of the best tools that you can use for grief. You can control that, and it'll help you control your emotions, which is a big one. So journal.
Yeah. I think something that I've learned as somebody who does usually have my life planned out pretty far is number one, giving up the control, just realizing that I have no control, right? And not trying to figure out how to get it back, but just for right now, I'm going to let it go. And 2, figuring out what I can control, because we haven't lost complete control, right? We still have 24 hours in the day. We still have that 24 hours that we get to choose how we use it. So, you know, I love to work out, and I love to go to a CrossFit gym to work out, and it's closed. And I had to make a choice. Like, I can either just not work out until this happens, or I can learn how to do it at home, which takes way more discipline. It takes way more motivation. It takes way more energy for me to get there and get motivated to do it. But it's my choice and I can control that. So I took something that I lost control of, figured out how do I take control back in a different way, right? And I think that sometimes we can't control what's happening in 3 weeks, but we can control what's happening in the next 24 hours, you know? And I think we can help our kids look at that too. Like, hey, for a birthday, you know, I don't know when we can have a birthday for you, but let's plan to have a birthday party when this is done. And that might be a while. It might be in a couple weeks, it might be in a couple months, but like, you know, and then as a parent, I know for me, I would forget that. Like, out of sight, out of mind, celebrating my kid. You know, we did it. We're going to do it at home, but that'll be out of sight, out of mind. How do I put that in my calendar for a couple months from now to remember, hey, we need to have a birthday party for my kid who missed out on that. And that's a horrible, I mean, kids are looking, my daughter turns 13 in a couple of weeks, you know, like that's a huge deal. The concert she was going to go to is canceled, you know, like all this stuff is canceled and they're not rescheduling it yet. And it's going to be a year out. And so what can we do to make that birthday special right now? And then know that like we can do the party and we can do the other stuff later, right? But we can control right now. I don't know. For me, I've had to change my mindset. And I think that's for so much of what you guys are saying. It's just, you take what you're in right now and it looks bad. And how can we reframe it to find the positive in it? How can we reframe it to find the hope and the joy and the peace in the midst of crazy storms and crazy out of controlness? And how do we bring that little sense of peace and hope back into our homes? And I think We have to do it by making a choice every day to change those small things that we can control. And that's about it. So do you guys have any thoughts? We're almost out of time. We've just got a couple more minutes. So I just want to open up to you, Kim and Sarah, if you have any last things that you wanted to share.
I have one last thing. So I think that perspective is key. This is not forever, but this time that we have is a gift that we get to spend with our kids. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I run 70 million miles an hour all the time, and I don't get very much time where I get to really just love on my kids and be present with my kids. But my work schedule is way quieter, and I'm home and I'm available more. I get to work from home, and I get to see my kids every day, and I get to see their highs and their lows. I get to hone in on things that have had to go by the wayside because I'm too busy living life and shuttling them to and fro and all of that stuff. Perspective is key. I'm not saying I don't have my bad days where I'm like, I just need a break, but perspective is key. This is the moment that we cry over and say, our lives are too busy and this is too crazy. This is the moment we're looking for. It won't last forever. We're going to go back to our high speed activities. This is it. This is our moment to love being with our kids.
I would just add that, because love was what came to my head at first too, like love one another. I think really as you're loving one another, be compassionate towards yourself. So as parents, be compassionate. This is totally something that we've not experienced before. I think as adults, our kids look to us to kind of help guide them through things. We've not done this. So this is new. We're learning with them. They're probably teaching us some things and we're maybe teaching them some things. So just be compassionate towards yourself. The same love you would give somebody else, give that love to you so that you can get through this, right? Without feeling like you failed on some level. There's no failure in this. We're all winning, right? Whatever you're doing your best.
Right. That is right. Hey, ladies, thank you so much for helping us out with this, giving your time. There's some great insights in here, and I really appreciate it. For those of you that are part of this webinar, we're going to send out kind of a fact sheet, a little helpful sheet that has just some of the bullets that we talked about tonight, and then also has some other resources for some of those hotlines that we talked about, and how you can find some therapists and stuff out there, as long as Sarah and Kim's information if you would like to reach out to them. I think you guys both are doing tele therapy right now. Yeah, so they're available for that. So there are links in there. You can reach out to them. And then also wanted just to make you aware, we are going to be having another one of these on Wednesday to answer some questions that came in. And so we'll get to those. If you have a question, you're going to get a survey right after this. It'll take you 2 seconds to fill out, but if you have a question, you can type it in there and we'll answer it as well. But thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you on Wednesday. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.